Welcome to Cats Are Not Small Dogs, changing the shelter system to save cats. Does anybody know where the term cats are not small dogs comes from? Has anybody heard that before? No one? What have you heard?
I've just heard it in veterinary medicine.
Right, you've heard it from veterinary medicine. So this is a veterinary medicine term that implies you cannot treat cats like dogs. They're not just small versions of dogs. You can't give them the same treatment that you give dogs. So this whole conversation is going to be about how we treat cats in our sheltering system in the U.S., why we can't treat them like dogs. It is the inescapable understanding that municipal animal shelters, with their essential design rooted in 120-year-old effort to protect the public from packs of stray dogs, are failing cats miserably. Show of hands, who in here feels like cats are second-class citizens in your community? I think that pretty much speaks volumes. Did anybody not raise their hand? No one not raised their hands. This is the elephant in the room that I don't think we're talking about in the animal welfare industry. We're not doing our best for cats in this industry. Does anybody disagree? More cats are killed in this country than dogs. Cats were put into a system designed for dogs, and it's not working out really well. Things are better for cats now than they were years ago, but we're still light years behind where we need to be. So we're going to talk a little bit about how cats entered this system. When did cats start entering the sheltering system? Why? It's important for us to understand the history of it a little bit so we can understand where we're going and how we got into this mess. So back in the 1800s, there were no laws whatsoever to protect animals. It was criminal mischief to kill livestock because those were valuable, those were income for people. So there were some laws if you went out and shot your neighbor's cow. But nothing else for domestic animals or for cats. Cats were considered wildlife. They were wild animals. They just lived outside. They did whatever they wanted to. They interacted with humans somewhat, but we left them alone. They were part of our landscape, and we left them alone. In 1867, we started legislation to protect all animals, not just the valuable or the livestock. And as some of you know, some of you probably know, that was when Henry Bergh founded the ASPCA back in the late 1800s. All the way up until 1940, cats were still considered wildlife. So 1940, it seems like a long time ago for some of you younger folks in here. For the older among us, it's really not that long ago. Cats were still considered wildlife. We didn't go out and round them up. We didn't bother them. They didn't bother us. But the fear of rabies transmitting to humans became an issue. And so people started rounding up dogs, drowning them by the hundreds. That was the method of animal control from 1867 forward. Kids would be given a stipend to go out and catch dogs, and they would mass drown them in the river. But cats were mostly still left alone. They were still wildlife. We didn't bother them. They didn't bother us. That changed a little bit in 1940 to 1950 when we started to think of cats as property that we own. And that's when things started to go south. Even though cats were not a rabies threat to humans, shelters and animal controls, well, I should say animal controls because there really were no shelters. Animal control started rounding up cats to clean up the streets. It was part of this procedure to clean up the streets, make everyone safe from rabies, and we're not going to start rounding up cats. Back then, getting them out of the shelter alive was certainly not a priority. So, of course, that meant anyone who was rounded up was pretty much killed. In the 50s, we started to think of cats as companions. The first commercial pet food came out. In 1947, kitty litter was invented, which is when we started this concept of cats can start living inside if there's kitty litter for them. Sterilization became required before adoption in the 60s. And interestingly, to me anyway, in 1970, it was shelters that created the concept that cats belong indoors. It wasn't until then. And shelters created this concept in the idea that if cats live indoors, they can't be outside procreating. And so it was meant as a method of population control. to keep your cat inside. That's where this idea of an indoor cat came from, shelters in 1970. Obviously, that didn't work. It didn't do a whole lot to cut down on homeless cat numbers. And back in the 70s is when cats started becoming members of family. It's when we got commercial cat food, funny little cat ads, and all these wonderful initiatives started in the 80s. Best Friends, Alley Cat Allies, TNR started to being introduced as a concept, and San Francisco ASPCA became the first no-kill shelter. So this concept of cats as pets, part of our families living indoors, is really a new thing in the grand scope of things starting in 1970s. This is how cats entered this system, designed for dogs and livestock. What's really changed since? Nothing. Maybe some tweaks here and there, for sure. We're certainly not drowning dogs in the river. Things have improved a little bit, but on an elemental design, not a whole lot has changed. There's a bunch of ways I feel like we're failing cats, but we'll talk about some specifically to keep us on track. Let's talk about return to owner. 2% of cats in this country who enter a shelter ever get returned to their owner. It's a pretty safe bet that if your cat ends at animal control, she's not coming home. It's 20% for dogs, which is still abysmal, but far better. Stray cats are 13 times more likely to find their way home if they're outside if you leave them alone than if you are a good Sam and you take them to the shelter. 13 times more likely to go back home on their own than be taken to a shelter. And if they get impounded in this country, there's a 50 to 70% chance that they'll be killed at animal control. Does anybody do microchip clinics at their shelter? Do you guys get a lot of cats coming to those? They discourage it. They only do it free for dogs. And they don't want cats and dogs in at the same time. Does anybody get a lot of cats at their microchip clinics? A couple people? One lady who brings in her neighborhood cats. God bless her. A whole lot more dogs show up to these clinics than cats. Would we agree on that nationwide? It's hard to get your cats to go to the vet, to go to the clinic, to go to anything. I've never seen a microchip clinic that goes to the cat in home. I've never seen the microchip clinic go to the animal that needs the chipping. Should we impound cats at all if we know that 2% of them are going to get home? If we know that they stand a 70% chance of being killed, should we impound them at all? Should we leave them on the streets? What should we do? Spay and neuter them and put them back. Some people have an issue with that. Get them to rescue if you can. Should we be holding them for a stray period? This is another big controversy. Or should we eliminate stray hold whatsoever and make that cat immediately available to rescue or to another adopter with no stray hold? There's arguments on both sides of that. We do want people to be able to come back and reclaim their pets, of course, but if they stand a 2% chance of that and a 70% chance of being killed, that's a balance. And I don't have the correct answer. I don't know. No stray hold also means they can kill them immediately. Should we have a stray hold? These are all kind of questions that I haven't seen a whole lot of industry talk about. What's the correct thing to do in this situation? Is there an industry best standard? Housing for our cats at the shelter. Abysmal at best. For a lot of us, I know some of us have magnificent new cat shelters, and that's wonderful. A lot of us are still working with cages in a typical shelter where we are a cat surrounded on all sides by our dominant predator, the dog. What happens to a stressed cat in the shelter? Upper respiratory. They get sick. Cats are particularly susceptible to stress. And in a lot of shelters, as soon as we're sneezing, that's a dead cat. Or they appear fractious or feral. All of my house cats at home would act like a Tasmanian devil if they ended up at animal control. And what happens to stressed or fractious cats when they end up at animal control? A lot. They just kill them. Stress is hugely important when we talk about sheltering cats. And again, here they are in a system designed for dogs with no species consideration. In veterinary medicine, we lag way behind on cats versus dogs. 52% of cat owners don't seek routine vet care, and 58% say their cat hates going to the vet. Does anyone's cat like going to the vet in this room? One person? You have the weirdo cat at home? I have one weirdo who likes going to the vet too. But people don't take their cats to the vet as often, in part because it's super stressful to go to the vet, and people don't want to do that. There's not enough vets who are feline-friendly, fear-free handling. It's super stressful for a cat to go to the vet, or really anywhere. They don't travel like dogs. They don't like to go. They don't like to go to the bar with you at night and sit out on the porch and mingle with your friends. They don't want to go meet the vet and wag their tail. They want to stay at home and be left alone. But because we're not taking our cats to the vet, follow the trail of money in who gets the most research put into vet medicine. Research, pharmaceutical companies put their money in good investments. And that good investment is dog medicine, because dog owners take their dogs to the vet and pay for those treatments far more often than cats. So our medicine for cats lags behind. This is a problem. Does everybody know Dr. Julie Levy, University of Florida? She's one of my personal cat heroes. And I was talking to her about this presentation, and the quote that she gave me has stuck with me. Cats are small, quiet, convenient little creatures. It's easy to put them in a corner and forget about them. Does that resonate with everybody at your shelter? Really easy to forget about your cat programs. It's really easy to tuck them away. They fit in small little cages. They don't make a whole lot of noise. When you walk past them, they're not barking, demanding attention. It's kind of the same for the cat staff, isn't it? Cat rescuers, cat staff are the same way. We're all cats. Cat people are very much like cats, I found. We're all pretty quiet. We stand up high and kind of watch what's going on. When we get mad, we may hiss or swat you. Usually if we're just that resentful, though, we're just going to resent it and harbor it, and then one day we're going to pee in your laundry basket or something to show you how mad we are. But we're not the dog that's out jumping on the kennel and demanding attention and demanding change. We're not as visible as the 200-row kennel bank of dogs. It's really easy to put us all in a corner and kind of forget that we exist. Who's got disproportionate resources in their community for cats? Everybody got enough? Do you have as much cat staff as you have dog staff? Enough, the same square footage, same veterinary care, same funding? I don't know anyone that does. Why are dogs so much more visible within our own shelters? They're man's best friend. What's that? It started that way. Yeah, it did. You're right, it did. It started that way with dogs. Easier to read the emotions of dogs than cats. That's a good one. Certainly with our own marketing and PR, I have this conversation with our marketing teams all the time. It's so easy to go get photos of dogs out frolicking in the lake and sitting with bluebonnets. I can't do that with a cat. I'm not going to put him in the lake and take photos. We'd get the police called on us. So I get it. Does that have to change? Yes.
I think that cats are largely viewed as more expendable because we're still combating the view of cats as like overpopulated vermin
Yeah.
out on the streets.
Yep.
The way that we react to one when we see a loose one is entirely different than the way we do when we see a dog. And so I think right from the onset.
I'm glad you said that because it's going to lead into my next segment. But if you didn't hear, she said that we're still thinking of cats as expendable. There's too many of them. They're out on the streets. They're vermin, and so they're not worth as much to us. They're what? They're resourceful. Yeah, they are. Cats can survive outside on their own. So the last part of failing, name me some executive directors in the no-kill movement who are cat people. Anybody? No one. Yeah, stray cat. Certainly if you're a cat-only group, I would hope that you're advocating for cats. Yeah, and thank God there are a lot of cat-only rescues now. Did somebody have a hand up?
Yeah, I was just going to say Stacey LeBaron with the Community Cat podcast.
Yep. So basically what I'm hearing is unless it's a cat-only rescue, there's not a whole lot of no-kill cat leadership. That's a problem. Where are you guys? I'm assuming you're all in this room. I'm assuming you're all in this room because you're passionate cat advocates. It's time to meow and hiss and roar and speak up. No, don't be the cat that hides up on the perch and is just resentful and swatty. Don't be the tortie. So kind of what you talked about, how are we messaging these animals? We're overrun with cats. We're drowning in cats. Cats, cats, cats. We have way too many cats. Do you think this might devalue our product a little? When we're talking about we're drowning in cats. We are just overrun with these stupid cats. I don't know that this really helps our mission to advocate for cats and to give them equal billing in our communities, to talk about drowning in cats this way, to contribute to that idea that we're overrun with them, that they're vermin. Think about that the next time you post on social media. Are you really advocating for the species? So let's talk about some data. In this country, we actually take fewer cats into our shelters than we do dogs, nationwide. Some of us may take in more cats than dogs based on our geography, but on a national average, we take in actually more dogs in this country than we do for cats. But once the cats get into the shelter, everything goes wrong for them. Everything. More cats die in care than dogs. More cats are killed than dogs. More cats are lost in care than dogs. Once those cats get to the shelter, everything goes south for them. Everything. And yet we're taking less in than we think. We do have population surges, as we all know. So one thing I want to toss around, one idea, maybe this isn't a total numbers problem, because we know we have less cats than we have dogs, and we're doing far better on dogs than we are for cats. Maybe this is an inventory management problem, a seasonal problem. God knows it's hard to manage kitten season when you have thousands coming through your door all of a sudden. My slide got a little messed up. But it says, supply and demand, for-profit business does great at this. We don't. So think about our friend the grapefruit. Grapefruit is super seasonal, right? Grapefruit, all citrus, it has a season. All that grapefruit comes in during a few months, just like kittens. How are industries that are seasonal dealing with these kind of surges in population and inventory? And it's not just citrus fruit. I mean, they make them valuable. When there's 1 billion pounds of grapefruit sitting at Whole Foods, what happens? It goes on sale. When it is in the middle of winter and there's no grapefruit, grapefruit's expensive. You have to figure out ways to warehouse grapefruit in the off-season months so that there's grapefruit in our stores year-round. How do we translate this to our industry? Because tons of for-profit industries are doing great at this. They're making billions at seasonal products. What lessons can we look at? Can we start thinking about this conversation from a new angle, completely differently? Because it's working for other industries, just not for ours. They've got temporary workers during their busy season. You've got products that keep the inventory healthy and quality until it's time to go to market. You've got transport systems in place to move your product when it needs to get moved to wherever needs more grapefruit. I think we need to completely shift how we think about sheltering cats in this country because what we're doing isn't working. We're going to have to start thinking outside the box and maybe thinking about things like grapefruit. Okay, want to hear some good news? The good news is this is an industry problem that we have with treating cats as second-class citizens. This isn't a community problem as much as it's an industry problem. There are certainly communities still where we are treating them like vermin, for sure. But we already have the public's hearts and minds with cats. Make no mistake, we have the public's hearts and minds. We are ruling the internet. You can't click a page and not find a cat meme, a cat video. You can't look on Facebook for 30 seconds without seeing a cat. We already have the public with us. This is an industry problem, that we talk about cats this way, that we don't allocate them the resources, that we treat them like second-class citizens within our own shelter walls. And that can either be good or bad, because I think it would be harder to convince the public than it would be to convince our own people. I hope, anyway. But it's also frustrating, isn't it? That a lot of times we end up fighting with ourselves to do the work that we should be doing. We end up fighting for things that we think are ours, things that we think are owed to us as cat advocates. We've got awesome things happening. We've got the top right here is a photo from Cat Town in Oakland. And I see Anne, the executive director, is here. There are new shelters popping up like Cat Town in Oakland that are cat specific. They're designed to shelter the cats as a species appropriately. They're given considerations for their unique species needs. They're not just put into a kennel bank that was designed for dogs back in the 40s. You've got things like architecture coming up and shelter design for cats. That's now a thing. It's actually now a thing that architects exist to make shelters that are humane for cats and give them species considerations that have never been given before for 120 years. You've got awesome things like the Million Cat Challenge. That's new. This is a Maddie's Fund initiative for shelters to learn ways to save cats, to give them equal billing, to learn new techniques that are species appropriate, TNR, SNR, the kind of space that cats need at the shelter, reducing your intake. Our euthanasia rates are better than they were, for sure. We still have so far to go, though. So far to go. But we do have more numbers. Look at the amount of people in this room who are cat advocates, who are you've all raised your hand and said cats are second-class citizens, and I think it's fair to say we're all sick of it. Everyone's sick of it? Yeah. So let's talk about some of the things we can do immediately to try and change things for cats. These are just immediate actions that we can do. Stop impounding community cats. Period. We haven't been doing that for very long in the grand scheme of things. And ever since we started doing it, ever since we started putting cats into a system designed for dogs, things have gone to hell in a handbasket for cats. Maybe we should look at, should we be doing that? Should we be rounding up those cats? Because they were doing fine until we started messing with them. If that's the best we can do to put them into a kill shelter where they are stressed, get sick, and then die an inhumane death, maybe we should just leave them alone. That's a conversation. Is that necessarily 100% correct? No, nothing is perfect in what we do, but we have to start a dialogue about this. Embrace TNR and SNR. Shelter neuter return. Probably the number one thing your shelter can do right now to increase your live release rate of cats. Put them back. We've got to educate the public on what's going on. I don't think as much as cats are on the internet, I don't think the public knows what's happening behind our shelter walls for cats I don't think people have any idea the cats that are killed in this country and why. And a lot of that is because we aren't transparent with the public. Very few shelters want to talk about how many animals they killed or why. This one sneezed and so we killed it. It's not really good publicity. But it's super important because without that publicity, you can't get people to help you. If people don't know that you need help, they certainly can't come to your aid and help you. If people don't know that ringworm kittens are being killed in the county shelter, they don't know that you need ringworm fosters to save them. If people don't know that feral cats are being killed at your animal control shelter, they don't know that you need barn cat adopters to come forward. So there's a total lack of transparency in what we do at the shelter, and especially with cats. Because again, they're those quiet, convenient little creatures that it's so easy to forget about. Reduce your owner surrenders. We know that upwards of 50% of people who surrender cats do so because of a lack of resources or behavior problems. Those are things we can fix as a shelter and keep those cats from coming in our doors to even start with. Redo your housing as best you can on whatever budget you have. There's all the new portals you can do. There's lots of creative housing you can do for cats, even in the most limited of shelters. I know our shelter was built in the 40s and 50s. I'm all too familiar with making do with what you have and making it as good as you possibly can for the cats. But it's important because, again, at many shelters, a stressed cat is a sick cat, and a sick cat is a dead cat. One of the biggest tips I give to everybody is to hoard your data. If your program is working or if it's not working, hoard all of the data you possibly can, because when you're looking for money from grant foundations, they're going to want to see your problem and how you plan to address it and how it's been going so far. So if you can show them, hey, we started this ringworm program, we saved 200 cats. If I just had $5,000 more, I could do more. Hoard every bit of data you possibly can on every program you have, on every cat that comes through your door. Hoard data. Spreadsheets galore. I promise you it will help you in the end game. Expand your adoption and foster programs, and I would advocate that you make them cat-specific. Cat foster programs are very different than dog foster programs. Everybody's got different needs. They're totally different species. It's fine that they're separate. Your teams can work together without being on a silo, but the species have different needs. Their fosters have different needs. So do their adopters. And we've got to create the vital programs like neonatal nurseries and ringworm and working cat programs to address all those populations of cats that are being killed in our shelters. All around the country, it's the same population of cats. It's ringworm cats and kittens. It's the feral, it's sick, it is the neonatal kittens, it is leukemia cats, sometimes cats with FIV. It's this very same group of cats and kittens being killed all across the country, no matter what shelter you're with. Thankfully, we know the programs that work to save them. But most importantly, y'all are your own worst enemies. And I am too. It's time to stand up in this room and demand the change that is needed in all of our shelters to get cats the services that they need, to be the no-kill cat director that leads your city onto a no-kill situation for cats. It's time to be the vocal dog person, if you will, to stand up and jump against your cage and bark and be obnoxious and not stand up high and hiss and pee in a laundry basket. You guys are the future for the cats in this country. You're literally looking around the room and you guys are it. You're the vocal cat, you're the torties who are going to scream up and demand change. Please, 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 if you do anything when you leave here this weekend, promise me that you're going to go home and scream like your toenails are being trimmed and demand the change that we need in this country for cats.